I remember I had players that I played with, friends, who we busted each other's balls. Like, we cared about each other, but we said, man, you really screwed that up. Hey, you missed your block. You missed your assignment. You missed that. Hey, you should have caught that. And it was never to like beat that individual down, but it was to hold them accountable to what we expected of them.
Welcome to the Superhuman Life. I'm your host, Frank Rich, and this is the only podcast in the world dedicated to helping men break free from the shackles of addiction through the power of faith and fitness. It is our goal with every episode to help you take back control and rebuild your body, mind, and spirit. And we do so by bringing you real and raw conversations with people just like you, aiming to find their place in this world while dealing with the everyday struggles and battles that we all face. Now, it is my belief that we were all created for a specific purpose. And if we can harness that belief or faith, then take control of our mind and body or fitness, then we can ultimately create the life that we've always dreamed about, our own superhuman life. I want to let you know how grateful and blessed I am to have you here with me today. Let's get on to today's show. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another amazing and exciting episode of the Superhuman Life. As always, I'm your host, Frank Rich, and guys, we have a superstar of a guest today. So fired up to share this individual with you, so fired up to share this conversation. Many of you will be familiar with his work and what he's putting out into the world. He's the host of one of the number one podcasts in the space, in the men's space, manosphere. I don't know what you want to call it these days, but his work is reaching and impacting millions of men every single week with what they're doing. And we unpack what it means to be a man. We unpack how he got here. How did he get to the point where he developed this massive movement? We talk about fatherhood. We talk about faith in the role of having a higher set of ideals, a higher value that we aim at for our entire life. We talk about women and what role does a woman play in a man's life. So if you guys haven't gotten it with all that, my guest today is none other than Ryan Michler. Ryan Michler is a husband, father, Iraqi Combat Veteran, and the founder of the Order of Man. Now, Ryan grew up without a permanent father figure and has seen firsthand how a lack of strong, ambitious, self-sufficient men has impacted society today. He believes many of the world's most complicated problems could be solved if men everywhere learned how to be better husbands, better fathers, better businessmen, and better community leaders. It has now become his life's mission to help men across the planet step more fully into their roles as protectors, providers, and presiders over themselves, their families, their businesses, and their communities. You can find Ryan blogging and podcasting at Order of Man, where he's working to help men become all they were meant to be. Like I said, guys, this is a jam-packed conversation. We get through a lot in just an hour. So incredibly grateful to have you here. Incredibly grateful to have you listening to this podcast. Now, obviously, like we do at every single show, we're doing this to provide value. We're doing this for impact. We're doing this to hopefully inspire you to step into that life that you were created to live. So if you want to continue to support the show, by listening, subscribing, downloading the shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to. But more importantly, guys, help us get in front of more people. And that can be done in one of two ways. Most importantly, whatever platform you're listening, if it's on Apple, if it's on Google Podcasts or Spotify, if you can leave us that 5-star rating and written review, if you're getting value out of these conversations, if they're not meaningful, if they're not valuable, let us know that as well. Where can we improve? We want to make this as valuable for you guys, and we want to make it impactful for your life. But more importantly, if there's somebody in your life that needs to hear today's message, if there's somebody in your life that is maybe going through some of these issues that we're discussing here in today's episode, do us a favor with sharing this conversation. But without further ado, guys, let's get into today's conversation. What it means to be a man with Ryan Michler. Ryan, my brother, welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Thanks, man. I've been looking forward to it. Looking forward to our conversation. We're going to have a good one to help a lot of people today. So let's get after it.
Yeah, man. I really think that this is going to be a powerful conversation. In this, call it the manosphere or the men helping men space. I don't even really know, how you would define, what it is you ultimately do, but I really, in the audience, probably a vast majority of them are familiar with you and your work. And those of them that don't, I'm really looking forward to kind of introducing you to everybody here. But for me, I've been really looking forward to this conversation because you really are, one of the leaders here in this space. I mean, with the movement and the mission that you're developing there over at Order of Man. So I'm really excited to kind of dive in and get a little bit about the story about how all this was developed and just really, make this an impactful conversation for all of our listeners. One thing I like to do a lot of times, I like to start these episodes with a quote. I think it kind of can set some context for where we're coming from and maybe set a little bit of direction for the podcast. And this is one I'm sure you've probably heard before, especially dealing and coaching as many men as you do. And I don't know the original source of it. I know it's been shared a couple different times, but there's a quote out there. It's been, it's been around for a while, but it's hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And my question, Ryan, is A, do you agree with this general, statement? And secondly, in today's world, in the climate that we're in today, where in this called stratosphere or in this quote, what situation are we currently in today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree generally with the principle. It's not always going to apply because look, where are we at right now? We're enjoying pretty good times, frankly. So I know there's COVID. I know that, or I should say, the reaction to COVID. I know that there's a lot of people out of work. I know that a lot of people are struggling right now. But again, generally, we're in pretty good times. I look at my kids, and one of my biggest concerns actually with my kids is, am I giving them enough opportunity to struggle? As a young boy, I struggled. My mom raised me primarily on her own, and we struggled. And she worked 3 jobs sometimes to make ends meet. And as challenging as that was when I was a kid, I look back now and many of those experiences are what shaped who I am today, which is a man who's tough and resilient and gritty and able to get the job done and doesn't ask a lot of questions or come up with a lot of excuses because my mom didn't allow us to do that. And then, I look at my life and we've been fortunate. We've been blessed financially and with our family and health wise. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, am I creating or giving enough hardship and challenge to my children so they can learn what they need to learn? Because look, if they don't, I think you're going to fall right in line with that quote. They're going to become soft and they're going to become weak and they're going to create a lot of hard times for themselves and society at large. So we generally need to do a better job introducing some hardship and we need to manufacture it because right now nothing's hard and nothing's challenging. I want some food. I'm going to go down to the convenience store. I'm a little warm here in the office. I'm like, cool, crank on the fan or crank on the AC. Nothing is hard anymore. And if we're not creating manufactured hardship, voluntary struggle, then we don't have anything to measure what is actually hard. The other day, my son said, I can't even remember what we were talking about. He said, this is hard. And I'm like, whoa, stop. Hold on a second. Honestly, I can't remember what it was, but I said, just stop for a second. Say that again. He said, this is hard. I'm like, what is hard? And he explained it. And I said, no, this isn't hard. This isn't hard at all. I think we were talking about, I don't know, doing something with our store because we do the merchandise. We ship it together and I have him do that. And I'm like, no, this isn't hard. There might be little challenges and things that we need to deal with, but this isn't hard. We'll go do some stuff later this afternoon that's actually hard. And then we can put some perspective on what isn't tough and difficult.
Yeah, it's so true. Literally everything we have. I talked about this on I believe I was being interviewed, but the host of that show, like as we were getting ready, like he just told his lights to come on, and I use that later on in the conversation. So like you said, like we're hungry, press a button, some food shows up. You need to get somewhere, press a different button. A car will come pick you up, take you wherever you want to go. It's too dark in your house, just speak out. We bypassed even the clapping.
Yeah, that's too much work, man. That's too much work.
The lights to come on. It's you just gotta say, hey, lights turn on, and it's so true. And it's with the work that I do with men, it's like they've created this inability to manage stress or whatever the circumstance or situation is. So they run to pornography as a release, not realizing that just that simple act it's shaping how you process issues. It's shaping how you can work through things. And if that's what you begin to train yourself every time something is difficult, you run away from it, then yeah, obviously it's going to lead you to creating tougher times. you talked a lot about or you mentioned it briefly here with your upbringing, and I know obviously your story is, I mean, it's there's layers to it. You just didn't go from single mom to one of the biggest podcasts in the world, and this massive movement helping millions upon millions of men. So can you maybe walk the audience through a little bit how you kind of got to the point where I think it's been about 6 years
Yeah.
or so you've had this order to man. Was it a specific single moment, like a true awakening? You woke up one day and you're like, I just got to change direction, or was it a series of events, or how did you kind of go from single mom growing up, hardship, working three jobs, lack of fatherhood, to now you're a father figure to millions of men? I mean, without taking up the entire hour that we have here, can you kind of walk us through what that process was like?
Yeah, I mean, a pretty average childhood. I grew up with my sister, and like I said, my mom primarily raised us on her own. I had some stepfathers coming in my life. Long story short, they weren't great role models, but I had some coaches. I was playing sports in high school, and I had some coaches come in, and man, they were tough on us, but they loved us and they treated us well, and they respected us, and they expected that we respect them. And I learned a lot of lessons on the baseball diamond and the football field from these coaches. But yeah, I mean, life was okay. I was running a financial planning practice, and I was kind of chugging along, and nothing amazing, nothing really all that bad. I had struggles in the marriage and struggles with finances, but nothing catastrophic. But man, I hit a wall. My wife and I went through a separation. This was probably 12 years ago now, and for a long time, I really blamed her for what we experienced and what we went through. Why did she do this? Why wasn't she loyal? Why wasn't she doing the things that a quote unquote good wife should do? Why didn't she appreciate what I was doing for the family? All the things that we tell ourselves. And I came to a very cathartic moment for myself and realizing, maybe it's not entirely her fault. Maybe you have something to do with this. And I stopped chasing her around through our separation, which is what I was doing up to that point, and really started to work on myself. I developed some new hobbies. I hired some business mentors and coaches that helped me with my financial planning practice at the time. I started going back to church. Developed some new friendships that I had kind of let go and go by the wayside over the course of our marriage. And it was interesting because as I began to fix myself, she responded and resonated with that. And that's influence. That's a leadership principle. Everybody wants to influence other people. How can I get so and so to do something? The best way to do it is to change yourself, and people will be influenced by that change in your behavior. So I learned that lesson. That was a great benefit and blessing of our separation, although it was difficult. And then I started having these conversations with guys. My financial planning practice was going well, and I was on the same path, and things were going well there. The marriage, we reconciled, and the marriage was going well. And I talked about these things, and then I realized, man, there's a lot of guys who are currently in the same boat that I was 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I was doing another podcast for my financial planning practice, and I did about 20 episodes. Realized very quickly I love the medium of podcasting, but I didn't want to continue to have that same old conversation of money and investments and retirement planning. And I pivoted really with the goal of connecting with powerful men that I could have one-to-one conversations with for free coaching. And I thought, well, why would they do this? Well, they would do it because I'm going to go ahead and publish it to my entire audience. I didn't tell them there was like 5 people listening at the time. And man, we launched in March of 2015, so just over 6 years now. And like you said, I mean, we've become one of the biggest podcasts in the world, which is a testament to some of the things, yes, that we're doing right. We're going to take credit for that. But also that there are millions and millions of men who have gone through similar experiences, who want accountability, who want camaraderie, who want to work with other men. You talked about pornography earlier. Not only does it rewire your brain, but it also causes you to, in the face of something difficult, even if it's trying to court and be intimate with a woman, that can be challenging in and of itself. That takes effort. Well, what you're doing is you're withdrawing, you're retreating, you're slinking into the corner, and you're being sleazy, and you're hiding, and you're lying, and that's not a great way to deal with situations. And so men really want to learn how to be more assertive and more bold and step up as leaders in their businesses and their families and their communities. And that pertains to pornography, but it pertains to growing a business or leading your children, or hanging out with the guys. Men want to lead. And so we found very quickly that if we could share this message of masculine leadership, men would really resonate with that, and in turn take that information and then go apply it in their lives. And we've been very successful in doing that.
Yeah, it's speaking to that porn point real quick. It's like you create this cognitive dissonance, like, what you're saying, if you're projecting a certain image or certain identity into the world, yet you kind of have this secret life kind of going on that nobody really knows about. You're not out there advertising like this is my porn genre, this is what I'm into. Internally, you're kind of having this battle, like, I'm telling the world I'm one, and I dealt with this myself as a fitness, online coach, putting content out in the space. I'm like realizing, like, I'm telling the world they need to get fit so they can become the best version of themselves. Yet I had this secret little habit kind of going on behind the scenes, and it took really, me kind of coming face to face with that reality. Curious what it was about the podcast medium that really attracted you to it. I know for me, probably around late 2015, I kind of stumbled across my first podcast. I believe I was going down a Tony Robbins rabbit hole, and I found Lewis Howes, and I just got sucked in. I realized, wow, you can, no matter where you are, you're driving in the car, you're doing chores around the house, whatever it is, you can just listen and be involved in a conversation with other people. And I just became, addicted. I don't like to say addicted, but it became something like anytime I'm doing something extra, like, I'm constantly growing, I'm constantly evolving. What was it with you in podcasting that really, attracted you to the space?
Yeah, I think you and I are probably very similar in that I was really excited to be able to listen to conversations that were interesting to me on demand. If I wanted to listen about growing a business or getting stronger or how to improve my golf game or anything that I could have thought about, I would just type that into the device and it'd pop right up and I had this instant information or entertainment on demand. And when I started my podcast, my financial planning podcast, I really did it because I thought it would help me get new clients. But I had this internal conflict, like maybe this will work. But then I thought to myself, no respecting individual, self-respected individual will listen to what I have to share. They don't know me and then hire me to do their financial planning. But then I got a call from a pediatric physician. He lived in Pennsylvania, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, Ryan, I need to get some disability insurance." And he had this like laundry list of features that he wanted in his disability insurance. And I don't know about you, but most people don't know anything about disability insurance. And this guy knew everything. He's like, "I want this feature, this benefit, this enhancement." And I stopped him and I said, "Hey, you seem to know a lot about disability insurance, which is not real common. So either you know the industry or maybe you're shopping around. How do you know so much?" And this is the moment that I will never forget because it altered the course of my life. He said, "Oh, I don't know anything about disability insurance. I just listened to your podcast and I wrote down everything that you told me I needed for disability insurance." And I was like, got it. Okay. So I'm in these guys' earbuds. It's going into their brain. Now they see me as an expert, which we can use to our advantage. And we can have different motives for doing that. We can have honorable motives for doing that. And we can have uh, non honorable motives for doing it. So I've always tried to use that power, and it is powerful for good reasons to help and uplift and edify other people. And I realized, man, if I could sit with you in the car without having to be there, but not only sit with you, but sit with thousands of other guys who are in the car or mowing their lawns or on their run or doing their workout, what a powerful opportunity for me to share a message, leverage my voice instead of just a one-to-one conversation I'm having with somebody. Now I can reach thousands of people with the same hour. So it's a very leveraging skill set. And it helps build the influence that I wanted to have with other people by impacting their lives positively. So it's been a great journey. And I haven't always been a great communicator. That's something I've been very deliberate and intentional about working on. And man, I mean, what better way to do it than to talk with some of the most high achieving men on the planet for hours and hours and hours about what they did and how they got there and being curious and interested in what they have to share with us.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And as a man of faith, a believer here myself. I mean, you mentioned, we can leverage, this power, we can leverage the medium for good and or bad. And I think obviously, the success that you've had, how your mission and how you and your family have been blessed shows that you guys are doing it, the right way and doing it with integrity. And it's showing in the impact and obviously showing in the success that you guys are having. You talked about here growing up, you had these coaches kind of in your life, and I think every man, or the vast majority of men, can look back, especially if they were active in sports. There's been a handful of coaches in a boy's life, whether it was in little league, pee wee football, or whatever. Maybe a coach at school, and then for you, what I took away, it's like as you kind of matured into adult life, like you removed yourself from getting coaching, and then you went through this breakup with your wife, and you talked about like once you got around the right type of men again, like you brought coaches, recruited coaches into your life, and you even said it here with your desire to do the podcast. You're like, I wanted to selfishly do this for the coaching aspect for me, much like I'm trying to do here. Like I want to, I'm here today learning from one of the best. But I think that this is a common thing, like boys have coaches because they're in sports, but very few men have coaches in life, whether it's for business or for relationships or for just mentors in general. Why do you feel that there's a, not a disconnect, I don't think that's the right word, but why do you feel so few men, perhaps don't have coaches in their life? Yeah, let's start there. Why do you feel that that's
we could talk about this for a very long time. So I'm gonna hit on 2 points primarily. During the Industrial Revolution, the men left the home and they went into the workforce, right? They went into the cities, they went into the factories, and they stopped teaching little Timmy and little Tommy and little Susie about life and how to work hard and how to live virtuously, and taught them about the gospel and all these other things that a father would traditionally or had traditionally taught their children. They're now gone. They're out of the house. Then mom left, right? That we have the early feminist movement, and mom left because she had to go do what a man could do to prove that she was equivalent of a man, which is absurd. And then we're left with little Tommy and Timmy and Susie here at home with no real place to go. And so they put them into the school system and they're indoctrinated in different ideas and concepts that don't ultimately serve them. But look, little Timmy and little Tommy grew up without dad around. So, and they didn't have any other men around either. Okay. So that's one. And again, I'm just skimming the surface on that. The other thing is if you look at pop culture, think about who we as men are attracted to. All right. We're attracted to, and I'm talking from a masculine perspective, we're attracted to the Marlboro Man, Jason Bourne, James Bond, Batman. Okay, all of these guys are what I think most of us would say on the surface epitomize the pinnacle of masculinity, right? And what do they all have in common? They're loners. They're lone wolf, right? They don't work well in a team. They don't work well with others. They can always do it on their own. But hey, they look good. They're strong. They get the women. They get the job done. And so over hundreds of years, maybe not hundreds, we'll say decades. Over decades, we've begun to believe that we as men no longer need to operate in tribes. We can do this on our own. And you hear it. You hear guys. They talk about being a lone wolf. Like, I don't need anybody in my life. I can figure it out on my own. And that's a very egotistical perspective. And, there's some truth to it, actually. If you go at it alone, you could figure it out on your own. But there's a cost to that. There's a cost to your well-being. There's a cost to your success and your livelihood and other things as well. Or you could say, I don't have it all figured out. I need other men in my life. And guys that were in competitive sports as a kid, they know that because they played on teams, right? And where they did well, other people struggled. Where other people struggled, they did well, and vice versa. They had coaches that were guiding them and mentoring them and teaching them and instructing them and calling them out on their shit. I remember I had players that I played with, friends who we busted each other's balls. Like, we cared about each other, but we said, man, you really screwed that up. Hey, you missed your block. You missed your assignment. You missed that. Hey, you should have caught that. And it was never to beat that individual down, but it was to hold them accountable to what we expected of them. And then for the most part, most men who get out of school, high school, maybe college if they're an exceptional athlete, their competitive sports days are over. So maybe they go into the military and they get some of that camaraderie. But outside of competitive sports in the military, you're not going to find it. Like, now you go sit down, you shut up, you go sit in your cubicle, you do your work for 8 to 10 hours, you don't ask a bunch of questions, you just put your head down and go to work, and that's it. That's your life. And then what? You get home, your kids are bouncing on your leg, your wife might be nagging at you or have a honeydew list, and that's the extent of your life. And you think you just build up these walls and I don't need F everybody else, zero F's given, that kind of stuff. I don't need anybody else. And you just struggle and you can't figure out why it is. I'll tell you, when guys get married, the first thing to go is what? Their friends. It's the very first thing to go. It was for me. And, like I wanted to be around my wife. I love her. I want to be around her. I want to spend time with her. And so I let my friends go and my hobbies go. But that's actually some of the things that I needed to actually be a great husband and a great man. And I let it go because I told myself, well, I need to be here present for her and the kids 100% of the time. And you just don't. So I've talked about so much, but these are some of the issues that we're dealing with this lone wolf mentality. It's not serving anyone.
That need for friends and relationships outside of the marriage, it rings so true. I was having a conversation this morning with somebody. His wife is accusing him of cheating through Instagram. She's constantly checking his social media. He's like, I don't have a porn problem, but she's got some trust issues. I'm like, let me ask you a question. Like, who does she have speaking into her?
Of course,
and it was her family. Her family, that her parents were divorced, like they were swingers, so they're not, they don't really understand what a winning marriage is. And then I was like, well, I was like, JC, what do you have going on? Like, who are you spending time with outside the marriage? He's like, I don't really have any brotherhoods. He's like, I have 4 kids. He's like, I have my business, multiple businesses, a very successful entrepreneur. And then I have my wife. And I said, that's a problem right there. Like, you guys need lives outside of that. He even used a term like, yeah, my wife all the time. She's like, you're perfect. I was like, first of all, she's got to stop looking at you as perfect. There's only one perfect human that ever walked the planet. But it's so true. And I mean, it's obviously been a massive part of my transformation is having coaches, having mentors, having the right men around me. Here, I want to.
It sounds like, if I'm just hearing that, it sounds like some self-esteem issues on her part. Like, I'm not going to obviously jump to conclusions. I don't know the situation, but I've seen things like this. It's self-esteem issues, self-worth issues, and then you're perfect. Well, you're projecting that, and she's almost feeling like at some point I'm going to be let down, so I'm going to try to figure out how to get out ahead of it. Otherwise, I'm going to be caught off guard. So that's something that happens. But I think you're exactly right. So here's another concept. A lot of guys will say, my wife, she completes me. She completes me. She's my everything. It's like, that's a very dangerous road that you're walking down. If she completes you, or she's your everything, or your world centers around her, that's not actually how it should work. Very dangerous. Instead, I look at for me, when my wife and I went through our separation, I would have probably said that. She's my everything. I can't live without her. These are the kind of things I would say. And I learned that I can't allow her to complete me. I can't allow even my children to complete me. I have to be whole without them. Because if I can't be whole without them, then I certainly can't be whole with them, because they can't give me everything that I need. My wife can't give me everything. There's nothing she can complete about me. There's nothing my children can complete about me. People don't like when I say this because I think they misconstrue it or think that I'm being a jerk. But I will say that my wife compliments me. My children compliment me. When we walk together, we're stronger because we complement each other. And I don't need her. She would say she doesn't need me, but I want her here because we're powerful together. And if I can derive my own energy and my own sense of power from my hobbies and my pursuits and my interests and other friends and activities, and by the way, she can do the same thing over here, we then voluntarily come into the relationship more powerful, better equipped to give and to serve and to do all the things that we as husbands want to ultimately do.
Yeah, we had a Christian relationship coach on last week, and we addressed this exact topic right here. I see it all the time in church and with young men coming up. And it's, even I hear parents say it, like, I'm just waiting for, I'm waiting for my son to find the right Christian woman to complete him or to help him step into his purpose. And like my interpretation of the scripture or of relationships, the way that they're designed, it's like, no, a man needs his mission. He needs to be serving, protecting, having something outside of himself that he's working towards. Then the woman comes into his life as a helpmate, in addition to what he's already doing. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 3. Right there with you. I mean, it may be a difficult question to answer. I'm sure you have a great answer for it, but order of men. We're talking to men here specifically. We've dropped the term masculinity. I know you speak a lot about the difference between being a man and being a male. And can you just what I don't want to say what is a man, but maybe there's no better way to really really structure the question. Like what is it, what does it mean to be a man, or what does it mean to be on the path to being a man? Yeah, I don't know if the question makes
Yeah.
sense, but
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Obviously, just because we've been doing this for 6 years, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this. And there's a very simple framework. A lot of people, when I share this framework, will say, well, it's not that simple, it's not that easy, it's not so black and white. No, it actually is. Most of culture, I won't say most, but a large portion of popular culture, which I've dubbed the doctrine of popular culture, is convinced that it's more nuanced and that it's more gray. And first and foremost, so you asked, what is a man? So first and foremost, a man is biologically male. It's ridiculous to me that we even need to say that. And I know it's going to rile a bunch of people up, but that's the reality. Like, you're not going to redefine words to fit your narrative and to fit what you believe. A man is biologically male as a prerequisite. That's it. Okay, now there's more to being a man than simply being male. For example, my three sons, I have three sons and a daughter. My three sons are not men. Nobody expects them to be. They're not acting like men. They're male, sure, but they're boys. They're not men. So clearly there's a difference between male and man. So that's the first thing. A man is biologically male as a prerequisite. Number two, masculinity. What is masculinity? Masculinity is a set of characteristics, behaviors, attributes, generally associated with men, because there is a set of hormones that we have in varying quantities that make us act and behave and think a certain way, which is different generally than women. So masculinity is amoral. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, but it needs to be refined, it needs to be harnessed, and it needs to be honed. It's like a wildfire. It can destroy, and it can also clear the path for things that are good. It can be used for both good and bad. Okay, then we have man. Okay, man is somebody who has learned how to use and harness his masculinity to produce effective outcomes for himself and other people, primarily to protect himself and other people, to provide for himself and other people, and to preside, which is synonymous with leadership. And if he's able to do that, he is being A, manly, and B, is a man. So that's a very simple framework. There's not a lot of gray in that. There doesn't need to be a lot of gray in that. And some people say, well, who defines you? Who makes you the all-knowing, being about what is a man? Look, I'm on the path. I don't have everything figured out. I have urges that are what I would say the natural man. You talk about pornography. I have lustful urges just like any man does. That's the natural man. So I need to learn how to harness that masculinity for effective outcomes. In this case, to be intimate with my wife and to procreate, right? That's using your raw masculinity in productive and effective outcomes for you and the people who are impacted by the decisions that you're making. So any male that is on the path of harnessing those characteristics is acting in a manly way, and I think is entitled to the title of man, which is earned, not necessarily given or you're born with.
yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And one thing, Ryan, I probably should have told you here before we started. We don't have to worry too much about offending people. I'll share with you here just a story. I had a guest on about 10 episodes or so back, and he's sharing. He's like, yeah, I got this community of Facebook, and he was a men's coach. And then he's like, we welcome men, we welcome women, we welcome anybody else that identifies as anything else. And I wrestled with it, Ryan. I wrestled with it in the moment. Like, do I push back on it? It was an opportunity for him to kind of plug, just like I'm sure you do. You always give your guests a chance to kind of plug what they have going on. And so I didn't say anything in the moment. And then, I sat on it and I reached out to a mentor. I was like, do I cut it out of the podcast? I don't really want to be like, I don't want the world to feel like I'm endorsing that stuff. And they're like, no, then you're editing podcasts for content. And that's not the way that you really do this thing. We try to just keep it raw and organic. So, in the intro, and I recorded a separate outro. I made a very specific note. I'm like, hey, the guest said something here. Like, I just want to let you guys know I didn't agree fully with it. I want to leave it in there out of respect for them. But I'm right there with you. This whole, biological male, biological female. No, it's like male or or female. It's one or the other. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole here with you today.
Well, and
But
let me say this too,
um,
Frank. Like, if somebody wants to, if somebody believes, like a woman believes herself to be a man, or vice versa, oh, okay, all the power to you. But I'm not obligated to agree. I'm not obligated to acknowledge that, because that's not how I see it. So, I don't have any problem with anybody who sees it like that. But again, I'm not going to change my perspective just because somebody else thinks I should, or is wanting me to, or would like me to be required to. I don't get it.
you talked about you being on this journey, like really what you're doing. It's you're documenting your growth. You're documenting your journey of continuing to grow and evolve as a man. So here I think you're somewhere over 600 episodes. You've been at this for quite a while. You mentioned interviewing some of the world's greatest men. Businesses, business owners, entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs. You've had some of the greatest men in the world. What's something you've learned about yourself, or the biggest takeaway. And I know, once again, it's a big question because you've spoken with so many individuals, so maybe hard to kind of narrow it down to one or two takeaways. But what's something maybe you've kind of learned about yourself in this journey of doing this for 6 years?
Yeah, it is a large question. It's a broad question, and like you said, I mean, to be able to interview now, I think we're close to 330 or 340 successful men across the planet. How do you compile that into one succinct answer? I would say for me, the thing that I've learned more than anything, and also has moved the needle the most in my family and business and community and my other ventures that I have going on, is taking responsibility for myself. It's so easy to pin it on somebody else, to pin it on external circumstances, and because it's so easy, a lot of the times we do it subconsciously. We don't even realize we're doing it. And then if somebody points it out, you're like, no, 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 that really is a problem, and that's the catch. We see these outside circumstances that do actually impact our lives, and we think because they impact it to this degree that we can make it impact it to this degree. So the stock market is a great example. As a former financial advisor, I'd have people and hear from them who, I lost my entire life savings because of the stock market. No, you lost your entire life savings because you were an idiot. Okay. Yes, the stock market was a factor. It was a contributing factor, but that was the medium for you being an idiot. That's just the medium you used, right? It would be like saying in the fitness world, like, the reason I'm 100 pounds overweight is because McDonald's is across the street and I just go there. Well, okay, don't go to McDonald's. Oh, well, you don't understand. Like, I only have a short work break, and that's the only thing. You're telling me you can't bring something to work and put it in the fridge or microwave it? Well, well, you don't get it. You don't understand. No, I get it. I understand. You don't understand. It's your fault. And here's the other thing. And this is one thing I used to do. I used to say that because my father wasn't around and I had poor examples of fathers in my life, that was the reason why I was a poor father, why I was a poor husband, and I didn't know any better. Well, here's the deal. I was a grown ass man. At some point, your excuses have to expire. I'm not saying they don't exist. I know people who have been victimized, and I think that's real, whether it's sexual abuse or verbal abuse or racism. I know people who have been victimized, but at some point, get over it. And I'm not trying to make light of that situation. I'm just saying at some point, you have to, put your big boy pants on and say, yeah, that happened. And that sucked and it was horrible. And here's what I learned. And here's how I'm going to protect myself. And here's what I'm going to do moving forward. But at some point, you have to take responsibility for your actions and the way that you respond to these situations that are outside of your control. And unfortunately, and this goes back to the strong men create good times quote you're sharing. Unfortunately, in society, there are too many people who A, love to be perpetual victims, and B, people who thrive on the manipulation of making other people into perpetual victims.
Here's one I get all the time. I mean, I'm sure you'll get a kick out of this. With the coaching that I do, I slipped, I relapsed, and I accidentally looked at
Yeah, you
pornography.
didn't accidentally do that, right? No.
No, no, you
Yeah.
didn't. No, you didn't. If you're working with me, then you've identified that it's been a problem. So we've worked through the process, and something happened, and you consciously said to yourself, going to look at porn right now would be a good thing. So yeah, I'm so in line with you here on this this personal personal responsibility. I mean, it's just over here over my shoulder. I mean, every client has to read Extreme Ownership, 12 Rules for Life. I'm big on both of those because I think at the core of both of the messages, it's personal responsibility. You're responsible for everything in your life. I know one thing for you that you talk a lot about is it's your kids. You mentioned here father, three boys and in one girl. What has and then you also mentioned maybe not growing up with the ideal father in your home, multiple stepdads and whatnot. What has becoming a father or this continuous process of you being a father, how has this kind of played a role in development and you becoming a man? And to follow up with that, is being a father necessary to be a man?
Fathering is, but being a father, I don't think is a necessary requirement. I know plenty of men who don't have kids because they haven't had the desire to, or maybe even physically they can't. I don't consider that them to be just innately less manly because of that. But fathering, yeah, fathering is a critical component of being a man. And when I say that, again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about protect, provide, preside. So one of the key differentiators between being a boy and being a man is that a man produces more than he consumes. A boy, on the other hand, will consume more than he produces, right? My three boys, they consume. They consume time, energy, resources, attention, food, provisions. That's what they do. Now, there's benefits, of course. I learn a lot from them, and there's great satisfaction and meaning in the investment of pouring into them. But they're consumers. I, on the other hand, should be able to produce more than I consume. Consumption doesn't go away. I still consume, but I should be able to replenish those resources, whether it's time, energy, money, food, whatever, and be able to go beyond myself. And that's what I mean by fathering. Is that as a man, you should be able to provide for more than just yourself. That might be financially. That might be your time. You're coaching a little league sports team. It could be that you have an employee at work who you've taken under your wing and you're sharing some thoughts and insights and lessons that you've learned. It could be mentoring or coaching or even your work, but there has to be a fathering element in order for you to be on this path to manliness. So yeah, that for me, becoming a father forced me to do that. Now I've got little mouths to feed. I've got food I've got to put in their bellies. I've got a roof over I've got to put over their head. And when I feel like not doing those things, or I feel like slacking off, or I feel like doing something I know I shouldn't be doing or don't want to be doing, I remember those kids are relying upon me. They would literally die if it weren't for me. So I have to be very aware of that. And it forces me to make better choices than I would if I didn't have those kids in my life. And you don't need kids to do that. You can have other people that you're fathering, but fathering is definitely an element, a critical element of masculinity.
Well, I've never heard it put that way, but it's so true. I mean, let's just look at for me, just I see everything through a very unique lens. These days, working in the addiction space, but the most successful addiction recovery of all time has been 12 Steps. AA, and what has made that organization so widely successful for the last 100+ years. It's once you go through the 12 Steps, you're highly encouraged to stay involved, become a sponsor to somebody. It's exactly what you're saying here. Like when you have somebody that you're guiding, that you're mentoring, that you're leading, it creates this deep level of accountability. Like they're looking at you to show them the way. And if you take that seriously and live with integrity, you're going to have to continue to grow, transform yourself because they're going to be progressing. So you always got to stay one or two steps ahead of them. That's amazing. So for single guys out there and they're looking to grow in their manliness, I mean, things like mentorship, you mentioned coaching a little league team, doing community service, getting.
You don't have to be married. You don't have to be a father to offer fathering, to produce more than you consume, to add value to people's lives. You can find that whether you're, I mean, even my kids, at times they show elements of that without having to be told. My oldest son, he wants to add value to my life, and my youngest at 5 years old, he last night I was putting him to bed, and he's got all these stuffed animals around him, and he's sleeping in the midst of this like nest of stuffed animals. And I was singing him a song, and he said, "Hey, Dad, here, will you give this to Mom?" And he had pulled up one of his stuffed animals, and he gave it to me, and he said, "Will you give this to Mom?" And I said, "Yeah." Why do you want to give it to mom? He's like, I just think she needs it. Okay, that's producing. He's adding value. He's thinking about somebody else. And that's what we need to do in order to be men.
I love that. Love that so much. I want to ask you about your faith, if you don't mind.
No, yeah, I don't mind at all.
You know, you mentioned it, you know, in this story, you know, kind of, you know, the separation with your wife. You're like, you started going back to church. So I'm assuming that there was a part of it maybe in your upbringing that you've had it. And I've heard you, you know, somewhat talk openly about it on, you know, some of the episodes that I have. Just looking at, you know, kind of society, you know, today. And once again, I want to put too much emphasis on all the world's problems, feminism and abortion and gender and this and that. But, you know, for me, I think a lot of this, it's like when you remove God from society, when you remove, you know, faith from the foundation of the way that a society is built, I think you're seeing a lot of the problems in the world can be closely associated back to the lack of God in people's lives. You know, just male, female, you know, God created man and woman in his image. There wasn't a third gender, or there wasn't a paradigm or a spectrum of gender. It's like, no, God created men and women. You know, I knew you before, you know, before you're born. I knew you in your mother's womb. You know, like, yeah, a baby in, you know, in the womb is a human being. You know, once again, there's biblical context to that. So
And
what role has your
biological,
faith
not
played?
simply biblical, biological as well.
Biological, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that as well. So what role do you see, maybe perhaps, you know, God or faith kind of being pulled out of society? I mean, I don't know all schools, but I know a lot of schools have removed God from the Pledge of Allegiance. And you know, there's just this massive wave of atheism, and just, you know, just the whole thing. I think you kind of get it. So how do you see that kind of playing out in the world's problems here, like the lack of faith or the lack of maybe spirituality or God in general, with what we're dealing in the world today?
Yeah, you know, I've always had faith in God. I've always believed in God. I remember even from the time I was little, my mom would, you know, take us to church, and we bounced around from different churches and different denominations. But there wasn't ever a point in my time where we weren't, a point in my life where we weren't going to church. But even still, you know, sometimes I struggle with my faith. I tend to be a very pragmatic, practical person, and so at times my faith is tested because of that. You know, so generally I continue to fall back to faith because it's always served me well. So I think I come from a different perspective, in that I can see the spiritual element, and I can also see the secular benefits of faith and religion and spirituality as well. There has to be some sort of objective morality. There has to be. You know, if we're going to function as a society, we have to have some sort of agreement on what is moral and what isn't. And unfortunately, in much of the society that we live today, there is this subjective morality that we can define it, and it can mold and it can shape and it can morph and it can twist and turn. And one day it can mean this and the next day it can mean that. And there's no principles because, you know, one principle might apply to this person, but it's going to be different for this person. And that's not a great way to operate a thriving society. So for me, there has to be some sort of objective morality that we all point to and say, that is moral, that is not moral. And I think the gospel is the greatest place to derive that sense of morality from. I would even go so far as to say, even if you're not spiritual, the gospel and the Bible is a great manuscript on living a rewarding and fulfilling life. I mean, I think we could at least come to that conclusion. It's disturbing that we've turned away from these, we'll just use the term institution for now, these institutions, and I'm talking about in this context, organized religion. It's disturbing that we've turned away from this, and we've embraced this idea of subjective morality. It's everybody, not everybody, a lot of people like to attack religion, spirituality, church. This is where people go to congregate. This is where people go to learn about morality. This is where people go to live wholesome, fulfilling lives. This is where people go to band towards a common purpose with people in their neighborhood. I mean, take racism, for example. You want to tear down the walls of racism? We should be encouraging these institutions where black men and black women, white men, white women get together. They're not worried about race. They're worried about this greater, grander message of morality and living a fulfilled life. And it's just going away. And I think it's very deliberate. Since we're talking about the spiritual component, it's part of Satan's plan, but it's being exercised through governments and institutions and authorities that want control over us. And we need to reject that and instead find some common ground of morality that we can all strive and work towards. If we were all going, let's say you and I were going to go on a vacation, and I say, hey Frank, like let's go on a vacation. You're like, cool, let's do it. And we'll go, we'll go travel the East Coast for a week. I say, great, I'll meet you in the East Coast. And you're like, okay, well, like when? I don't know, just like, maybe next week we'll do it sometime. You're like, okay, well, the East Coast is a pretty big place. What do you think? I'm like, I don't know. We'll probably just bump into each other at some point. We'll just tour the East Coast. Like we would never see each other. On the other hand, if we said, hey, Frank, we're on June 15th, I'm going to meet you in Pittsburgh, at this address, and we're going to start here, and that's where we're going to be. Okay, now we have a singular focus, and now we're on the same page. We're both going to meet there. You might get there a different way, because where do you live right now, Frank? I don't actually know. So you're in Tampa. You're in Tampa, Florida. I'm in Maine. So yeah, we're both going to take different routes to get there, but we're going to the same place, right? And having that commonality, that common purpose, and that common sense of morality is what's going to get us where we need to be in society, I think.
Love that. Yeah, and I don't even know if you said East Coast. Like, I don't even think Pittsburgh.
Yeah, whatever. Right? Who knows? But whatever.
For me, I
gotta
go.
That's the point. That's actually the point. Is like we don't know, right? So maybe you do show up in Pittsburgh, and I'm like, no, bro, I actually meant South Carolina.
Yeah, we got to have this. We got to have an ideal. We got to have an ideal that we're all agreed upon is the ultimate good. We aim our eyes at that, and that's what guides our moral decisions, and that's the ideal for for all of life. Absolutely love that, brother. Thank you so much, man. Want to be respectful for your time. I know you have some people coming to your house here, and dude, I'd love to to get you back on at some time down the road, because I think that we could talk for hours here. So obviously, the vast majority of the people are going to know where you are and know how to find you. But for those of them that don't, where can we find Ryan? Where can we find the podcast? Obviously, we got your book, so I want to plug the book down there as well. So yeah, just share where you're hanging out these days, whether it's social or the best way to get in touch with you and your movement out there. And I have one final question we want to wrap up here.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to the podcast, just type in Order of Man, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or Pandora, wherever you listen to podcasts. Orderofman.com is our website, it's our home base. And then I'm most active on Instagram at Ryan Michler. So that my last name is Michler. So at Ryan Michler. And I'm active there. So I try to respond to everybody who shoots me messages and responds. It's becoming increasingly difficult, but I still do try to be active and social with everybody who connects with me there.
Yeah, you got to hire one of your sons pretty soon to take that over for you and reply to messages.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because people are responding to me, not one of my boys or not some robot or not some assistant. Like they responding to me, and it's been hard because I've always felt like if they reach out to me, then I have some sort of obligation to respond back. I'm learning I don't, but I still do want to communicate, connect with as many people as possible.
Once again, I think that shows your integrity and why you're having the success, because people know when they reach out, they're getting you. People know when Ryan shares something, Ryan's sharing it. I think that's not always the case. Not always the case with people at your stature. Many times it's the intern or the assistant that is just pretending, or the VA that is responding to messages. So that's incredible.
Right. And look, don't get me wrong. I have support that helps me do certain things, but when it comes to personal interaction, that's me. That's my responsibility.
That's awesome, guys. Yeah, definitely. For those of you that out there that haven't listened to any of Ryan's podcasts, I mean, we talked about a few of the guests that he's had, but he's interviewed the greats, and he does some solo stuff. I know you have your Friday Ask Me Anything stuff, so we'll definitely get that plugged down. Go subscribe, connect with him on Instagram, pick up his book Sovereignty. The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. I'm about a quarter of the way through it. I had some issues with Amazon. The first one, they said they left it at the. They said they left it at the concierge, and the concierge doesn't accept packages, so I had to have a second one shipped out. So I'm working my way through it. I'm really enjoying it. So we have one final question that we ask every single guest. Obviously the title of the show is The Superhuman Life. The genesis of creating this podcast was my own story, was my own transformation. So we talked, a lot about faith today. We talked a lot about spirituality. I lived 35 years the first 35 years kind of doing this thing all by myself. I didn't really have any faith. I didn't really have any spiritual, practice or anything. I kind of, thought that I had all the answers in my own life, kind of doing this thing all by myself. It took a series of, life transforming moments to really come to the conclusion that I do believe that we were all put on this earth for a very specific purpose. And it is one of our primary roles and responsibilities to fully harness this vessel, to fully develop this vessel. We talk about the fitness a little bit here. So understanding that that there is a higher power, there's a purpose to our lives, and it's our responsibility to fully embrace this one body, because we're only given one body. So when I talk about living a superhuman life, for me, Ryan, it's really a belief. It's that belief in something beyond ourselves, and then it's the responsibility that I'm responsible for what I do here on this earth. So that's what I talk about when I define kind of living a superhuman life. But I like to get the guest take on this as we end every show here. So Ryan Michler, how would you define living a superhuman life?
Yeah, I like a lot of where you went. And as you were talking, it reminded me that I want to be remembered when I'm dead and gone. I want my kids and people who have been impacted by the work I do to think that, Ryan was somebody who was willing to try everything that came to his mind, as long as it was noble and honorable work, that he was willing to give it a shot. He's willing to take a risk. And I've seen so many guys, and I used to be this guy, where you'd have this idea and you'd have this thought and you wouldn't follow through on it because you were scared, and other people would try to talk you out of it, and you let the ease of your current path take over. And I realized years ago, it hasn't been that long, that if I have something that comes into my mind, some thought or some idea or some adventure that I want to pursue or hobby I want to pick up, then frankly, I owe it to my creator to at least take a step into what that could be. What a slap in the face if an opportunity or some sort of a cue is presented to me and I don't respond to it. So, one thing, and I'll give you this example as I kind of close out my thought on that. My oldest son, has been really engaged with what we're doing here. In fact, I had a podcast with Matthew McConaughey just yesterday, which is a really cool podcast. And I got done and I walked to my door and I opened the door, and my oldest son was just sitting there by the door on the ground. And I'm like, "What are you doing, bud?" He's like, "I was listening to your podcast. I really like listening to your podcast." And he's been talking about it over the past 2 to 3 weeks that he wants to start his own podcast. Well, man, I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how that's going to play out, but we have an obligation and responsibility to pursue it. We have an obligation, a moral obligation to pursue that path. And maybe it turns into something. Maybe it's a phase. I don't know. But it's here. It's a thought we have. We have a responsibility to act on it. And that to me is what it means to be superhuman, is that you're divine in nature. You have ideas and thoughts and triggers and cues that come into your mind, and you have a responsibility to act on those and pursue them to some degree.
I absolutely love that. And man, what a feeling that must have been. I'm not a father. It's for me, it's kind of the last thing that I have. It's like the last box that I have left to check. I've had some success financially. Have had some business. Where I was having incredible impact with all the work that we're doing here. And it's like, I know that there's obviously there's more for me out there, and I feel that's it. I feel wife and fatherhood will kind of be the icing on the cake for me, hopefully. But I can't imagine, man, that with the passion that you have for all that you do. I mean, to have your oldest, your son, like have that type of response and just so loving what you're doing. I'm sure that it was an incredible moment for you and the two of you. So amazing.
Yeah, it really
Thank
was.
you.
It really was.
Thank
I'm
you.
excited to do it with him. So should be good.
Yeah, brother. We'll have to have him. We'll have to have the two of you back on maybe to watch his show, man. We'll
give him a little bit to get his voice and his feet under him, but we'd love to come on at some point.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Well, I appreciate you, man, here today. I think we have a lot of value here for the audience. I want to allow you to get your guests there. So you guys heard it here, man. It's your responsibility, to fully step into the opportunities that are presented to you. So we appreciate you guys out there. If you haven't done so yet and you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on. And whether you're on Apple or podcast, do us a favor. We're trying to grow this mission. We're trying to grow the impact of this show. If there's somebody in your life, whether it's a man or woman, maybe needs to hear today's podcast, do us a favor of blessing them by sharing this conversation. But for Ryan Michler, Frank Rich, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.